Hello gamers, this is Sai and welcome back to Which Way Games. What superheroes known the world over for wearing red and blue?
You're that spider guy on YouTube, right?
Call me Spiderman!
Okay, Spider-Man! Don't flip! Yeah!
And with that being said, let's get on with the video.
Spiderman does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
Before I start the video, I just want to say I'm not going to be on screen too much because my allergies are playing up and it's not a pretty sight. However, thank you to the 71 subscribers who come back each and every week to watch my videos. Superheroes are everywhere these days, especially within the worlds of movies, comic books and video games. And with the most recent Marvel film opening up the new phase for the MCU, I do wonder what superheroes will appear on the silver screen next, and if they'll have a video game tie-in. Speaking of video game tie-ins, these were hugely popular back in the 80s, 90s and some of the 2000s. Some were great and actually fun to play, while others were a bit, you know, bad. For example, Street Fighter the movie The Game, which had bad controls, a flawed move system and many other issues that didn't help the game sell well. I mean, this game made no sense as it was a game based on the movie which was based on the game. In my opinion, the original Street Fighter series is up there as one of the best fighting games in history. Anyway, going back to superheroes, there is one that is known the world over and is probably one of Marvel's most successful franchises to date. This would be the Amazing Spider-Man. Like all superheroes, there's an origin story, so let's see where Spider-Man begins. Now, the Spider-Man comic series is still hugely popular and has had many different writers as well as artists put their own spin on the world of Spider-Man. And as I mentioned before, there have been movie video game tie-ins made about Spider-Man over the years. Spider-Man was co-created by Steve Ditko and the master himself, Stan Lee. After the success of comics starring the Fantastic Four, Stan Lee wanted to take the superhero idea and throw it out the window. He wanted to meet the demand of more comic books for teenagers, but with a hero they could identify with. Most superheroes had teenage sidekicks, and these sidekicks would have names that always ended with boy, like Superboy for example. But Stan Lee wanted to create a character that would age as the series progressed, but didn't want it to sound inferior to other superheroes. Going through several ideas and a couple of arguments along the way, Stan Lee finally got the chance to showcase Spider-Man in a comic book series that was going to be cancelled anyway. Spider-Man appeared in Amazing Fantasy issue number 15, but it wouldn't be until several months later, when sales figures were reviewed, that this single issue was Marvel's highest selling comic at the time. Following this, Spider-Man went on to feature in several cartoons and even a live action TV series in the 70s. With the success, video games ended up being made about the wall crawler. Starting out on the Atari in 1982, Spider-Man would go on to have more games spanning the 16-bit era and beyond. In fact, when Spider-Man made the jump to 3D gaming, this was highly ambitious, as at the time developers were figuring out how to make games in 3D work properly. Eventually, developers got the hang of 3D gaming, and there was one game that I think was possibly the turning point within this new medium. That would be the PlayStation's Spider-Man. Being developed by Neversoft, who are widely known for the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series and some of the Guitar Hero games, Spider-Man was a first in what was called free roaming within the Marvel Universe. Also, for those Marvel fans out there, Stan Lee would narrate a lot of the game, which as some will agree was probably the best choice made when it came to Spider-Man. Utilising the same build engine as previous Tony Hawk games, programmer Dave Cowling did what he could to create New York City, even within time and hardware limitations while Spider-Man was in development. In fact, Spider-Man was a hidden playable character in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, which he actually references while crawling over a billboard. Gamers could do all the things a spider can while wearing red and blue spandex, such as crawling along walls, shooting a web, making use of the Spidey sense, and other spider-related abilities, which I'll come back to later.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
Hi, how are
Spins a
ya?
web any size, catches-
Fans of the Warcrawler were excited to see a 3D Spider-Man game, as the others that came before were good, but this was going to be the first time web swinging would be experienced. With plenty of hype surrounding Spider-Man, there were several ports being worked on, such as the one for the Nintendo 64 and one for the Game Boy Advance. And in September of the year 2000, Spider-Man was released. And like always, let's go back to the past to see how Spider-Man was advertised.
Be Spider-Man. Swing from buildings. Shoot webs. Bring down the bad guys. And for the first time ever, you have all his cool spider powers.
Jim, the garbage isn't going to take itself out.
You don't just play it, you live it.
Jim?
Spider-Man the game. Rated E for everyone. From the creators of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
PlayStation.
The story of Spider-Man sees a supposedly reformed Dr. Octavius demonstrating a new invention to the public. Peter Parker as well as Eddie Brock, who were attending the Science Expo, both witness another Spider-Man attack some security guards, which causes the crowd to panic. With all the confusion and panic, the imposter Spider-Man steals the invention of Dr. Octavius. Eddie Brock naturally starts to take pictures for J. Jonah Jameson, but the imposter Spider-Man destroys his camera. Enraged by his act of vandalism, Eddie begins to lose his temper, allowing the symbiote Venom to take over. Peter Parker, now as the real Spider-Man, pursues the imposter into the city, which is beginning to be covered in a mysterious fog. Meeting Black Cat, she informs Spider-Man that a bank is being robbed by the Jade Syndicate, and they might have connections to the fog that's now engulfing the city. With the police believing that Spider-Man is responsible for the events of the Science Expo, they chase him throughout the city and do what they can to bring him to justice. Even a well-known vigilante with a skull on his top tries to step in to take down Spider-Man. Eventually, after dealing with enemies such as Scorpion, Rhino, Venom and Mysterio, Spider-Man learns that Doc Ock, as well as Cletus Cassidy, otherwise known as the symbiote Carnage, have plans of turning the residents of New York into symbiotes and use them to take over the world. Gameplay for Spider-Man has gamers controlling Webhead through a variety of levels, starting out at the rooftops of New York and even ending up within the sewers below. Taking advantage of Spider-Man's ability of wall crawling, this gave the game two different styles of gameplay. Gamers could either swing in, throw plenty of punches, as well as a few kicks, or be stealthy and use Spider-Man's abilities, including the infamous Spider Sense. This sense allowed Spider-Man to escape danger at the last moment, and gamers would be alerted to this ability during gameplay with brightly coloured shapes appearing around Spider-Man's head. Throughout the levels, health packs are available as well as web cartridges for Spider-Man to use. There's nothing more fun than webbing up a bad guy and watching them suffer, although how many times have gamers walked through a cobweb and been like, ugh, get it off, get it off. I swear the spider's probably going, must try harder. Having enough of these cartridges, Spider-Man could create a web shield to protect himself from enemies, and he could even create some web gloves which allowed him to punch harder. Another thing that can be found within the levels is some armour that bears a resemblance to the Spider armour for the 1994 animated Spider-Man TV series. In fact, speaking of the series, some of the voice actors even reprised their roles for the game. Spider-Man the animated series originally aired in 1994, and the series focused on Spider-Man and his alter ego Peter Parker during his college years at Empire State University. Peter Parker already has his powers, but viewers are shown flashbacks to fill in the gaps. And a lot of the classic villains from the comic books make an appearance, including Venom. I did have the chance to buy the original series, but I got X-Men instead, which is fantastic, but one day the Spider-Man series will be mine. Anyway, going back to the game, Spider-Man has plenty of collectibles, such as the various comic book covers hidden within the levels, and gamers could also unlock different costumes for Spider-Man. One of my favourites is the Scarlet Spider costume, which reminds me of the time Peter Parker has to deal with clones of himself in the comic books. In fact, a lot of these costumes have different abilities, which makes the game so much more fun to play. Eventually, Spider-Man will recover the secret base of Doc Ock and Carnage, as well as getting rid of the fog and rescuing Black Cat. Spider-Man then goes toe-to-toe with Doc Ock and Carnage, beating them both. Thinking he has saved the day, Spider-Man is then attacked by a tentacled monster that turns out to be Doc Ock infected with a Carnage symbiote. This particular boss only appeared in the video game and wasn't part of the comic book world canon. Being pursued by the monster, Spider-Man swings as fast as he can to escape not only the burning building but also the hate-filled monster. Once out of harm's way, Spider-Man is rescued by Captain America, Black Cat and even Venom. The ending has our heroes playing cards while the Human Torch is having a dance with Black Cat, but as for the villains, well, they're stuck in prison and Doc Ock is hitting his head against the bars in frustration due to the stupidity of the others, especially Rhino. When released, Spider-Man had varied reviews from system to system. However, the PlayStation version was classed as one of the best Spider-Man games around and went on to be the basis for future Spider-Man games. Now, the game isn't without its flaws. It has a frustrating camera angle and sometimes the control scheme can be disorientating. However, if gamers stick with Spider-Man, soon these flaws go from being bad to quite endearing. The only thing for me that seemed out of place was the character personality of Venom. Basically, he was turned out to be a bit of a joker, but this could have been because it was aimed at a younger audience. In fact, there's one young Spidey fan that I do know who absolutely loves the web crawler. Isn't that right, Freddy? Spider-Man proved to be very popular that over 300,000 copies were sold in the UK alone, and a sequel was made called Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro. I'll come back to this game in the future, but if gamers want a relatively easier game to play, then Spider-Man for the PlayStation is highly worth it, especially if you're a fan of the comic book series and the web crawler. Anyway, come back next time when Chrono and a few of his friends go on a mission through time to save the Earth from the destructive being known as Lavos. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.
Thank you.